The courtroom was unusually full that morning. Reporters lined the benches, their cameras temporarily banned from flashing, but their eyes locked on the tiny girl sitting quietly at the front. Her legs dangled above the floor, her shoes too big, her dress too formal for a child who hadn't smiled in weeks. 3-year-old Lily sat beside someone unexpected, not a parent, not a lawyer, but a retired police dog named Justice. He was a beautiful German shepherd with streaks of gray in his fur and a calmness that filled the room. Everyone noticed how closely the child leaned into him, clutching his thick fur like a lifeline. Justice sat patiently, head slightly lowered, as if he knew exactly why he was there. Lily's case had shocked the entire town, even the state. She was found in a foster home under the care of a man with no prior criminal record. But what authorities uncovered behind that closed door told a different story: bruises, neglect, and worse. The problem was, Lily wasn't talking. For months, not a single word about what happened. Not to police, not to therapists. Nothing. She simply shut down, her voice locked deep inside where it felt safe. The judge had reluctantly agreed to allow a therapy dog to sit with her during the trial. It was a rare move, but everyone knew the stakes were high. Prosecutors feared the jury would never connect with a silent witness. The defense was counting on it. Without Lily's voice, the man accused of harming her might walk free. No one had expected the girl to react the way she did when she first met Justice 2 weeks earlier. At the therapy center, they brought him into the room, and she'd simply stared at him. For 5 minutes straight, not a sound. Then, slowly, she reached for his paw. The therapist watched in stunned silence as Lily curled up beside the dog, burying her face into his neck. She didn't speak, but her body relaxed in a way no one had seen before. Now, as the trial began, Lily and Justice sat side by side at the witness table. Prosecutors kept their questions brief. "Do you want some water, Lily? Are you feeling okay?" She blinked slowly, but gave no answer. Her hands gripped the dog's fur tighter. The judge addressed the jury, reminding them that the child's presence alone was important, that trauma doesn't always speak in words. As expert witnesses were called and legal language filled the air, Lily remained silent. Every so often, she looked up at the defendant, her former foster father, sitting across the room. He avoided her gaze. Then came a pause. A recess was called. Lawyers shuffled papers and murmured quietly. Lily remained seated, Justice still at her side. It was then that something remarkable happened. She stirred. For the first time that day, Lily shifted her body, leaned closer to the dog, and gently touched his ear. Justice turned his head toward her. Their eyes met, girl and dog, and something passed between them that no one else could understand. Then came the moment that changed everything. Lily opened her mouth and whispered. It was too soft to hear at first. The bailiff leaned in. Her lips moved again, 2 small words. A reporter near the back noticed a ripple of movement among the lawyers. The prosecutor's eyes widened. The judge glanced down, curious. The dog remained still, his ears perked. Finally, someone asked, "Lily, what did you say?" She lifted a trembling hand, pointed directly at Justice, and said, louder this time, "He knows." The room went still. A strange hush fell over the courtroom, as though everyone understood the weight of her words without explanation. "He knows he's bad," she added, barely a whisper. Everyone froze. For the first time, Lily had spoken, and what she said turned the entire case upside down. The silence after Lily's words was so profound, it almost echoed. "He knows," she had said, pointing at Justice. Then came the words that stopped time. "He knows he's bad." No one moved. The defense attorney looked stunned, mid-note. The judge glanced over his glasses at the little girl, unsure if he'd heard correctly. The prosecutor stood frozen, the edges of her folder crumpling in her grasp. Justice didn't flinch. He sat like a statue, his brown eyes alert, his body perfectly still, like he was guarding something invisible but sacred. The judge cleared his throat and addressed the courtroom with a cautious calm. Let the record reflect that the witness identified the K-9 and verbally referenced the defendant. The defense quickly jumped to object. Your Honor, this is hearsay, and overruled, the judge cut in firmly. We are not dismissing this child's words. Continue. The prosecutor approached slowly, her tone soft, as though she might scare Lily away with even a breath too loud. Lily, she said gently, kneeling just a few feet from the child, can you tell us what you mean by that? Who does Justice know? Lily's eyes didn't leave Justice's face. She gently patted his neck, then looked up. For the first time, she turned her face toward the defendant. Her voice barely carried across the courtroom. Him, she whispered. Gasps rippled across the gallery. Reporters jotted down notes at lightning speed. Some of the jurors leaned forward, their expressions shifting from neutral to emotional. One older woman dabbed her eyes with a tissue. The prosecutor nodded. Lily, when you say, he knows he's bad, do you mean the man sitting there? The one in the blue shirt? Lily didn't speak this time. She just nodded slowly and leaned into Justice's side again, curling her body toward him in a way that said she'd said all she could say. Justice stayed still, but everyone in that courtroom could feel it. The atmosphere had changed. The prosecutor didn't press further. She turned to the judge. No further questions at this time, Your Honor. The defense stood next, but there was a nervousness in his step. He adjusted his tie, glanced uneasily at the jury, then at Lily. His voice was uncertain. Miss Lily, he began, forcing a smile. You're very brave for being here. But dogs can't really talk, can they? Silence. Justice doesn't actually speak words, right? He continued. Lily didn't respond. She reached up and gently held Justice's ear, then whispered something that only the dog could hear. The defense lawyer laughed nervously, trying to recover. Right, so maybe you're just imagining that he knows something? Then, without hesitation, Lily lifted her head. She stared at the defense lawyer with wide eyes and said clearly, You didn't hear him bark. The lawyer blinked. Excuse me? Her tone didn't change. You weren't there when he barked. The words carried more than confusion. They carried memory. The room shifted again. Prosecutors exchanged glances. The judge tapped his pen, intrigued. The prosecutor leaned in and whispered to her co-counsel. Was Justice assigned to the house? Raid? The co-counsel checked the files, flipping quickly. Then he looked up, startled. Yes, 14 months ago. Realization settled like dust on everyone in that room. Justice had been there before. The same house, the same child, the same man. Now the courtroom wasn't just dealing with a witness. It was unraveling a forgotten connection. Lily's words weren't metaphor. They were memory. The judge called for a brief recess. As people stood and murmured, Lily remained seated, still clutching Justice like a teddy bear come to life. She had said very little, just 2 words, really. But those words opened a door that had long been shut, and behind that door was truth. The recess was short, but behind closed doors, conversations were urgent. Prosecutors moved quickly, now aware that Justice the K-9 had been present during a previous raid on the same house where Lily was found. They pulled up old reports, photographs, and handler logs. One detail stopped them cold. Justice had barked relentlessly outside a locked basement door, refusing to budge, even when commanded. Officers at the time had chalked it up to canine instinct. But the report said this: Dog barked aggressively at basement door for over 4 minutes. Door was eventually broken open. No one inside. Area smelled strongly of bleach. The lead prosecutor ran a hand through her hair. "We missed it," she muttered. "We all missed it." Back in the courtroom, Lily sat quietly, curled into Justice's side like she belonged there. The room slowly filled again, and as the judge re-entered, murmurs died down. But now, everything felt different. It wasn't just a child and a dog anymore. It was a connection rooted in something deeper. Shared experience, shared trauma, and perhaps shared knowledge. Justice was more than a comfort animal. He had been there when it started. The next witness called was a forensic expert who analyzed scent memory in police dogs. He spoke calmly but confidently. Dogs are capable of extraordinary scent retention, especially when associated with trauma or aggression. If a canine was highly agitated during an event, they often retain some physical memory. It's possible that this dog recognized something familiar, either in the room or in the defendant. That last line landed hard. The defense objected again, calling it speculative, but the judge allowed it. Given the unique nature of the testimony, the court will hear it. Then came something no one expected. An officer who had been part of that original raid stepped forward voluntarily. He hadn't been called as a witness yet, but during recess, he overheard the discussion about the dog. "I remember Justice barking like crazy at that basement door," the officer said. "He wouldn't stop. He wasn't like that usually. That day, it was like he knew something was behind it. Something bad." The prosecutor asked quietly, "Was the defendant present during that raid?" The officer nodded. "Yes. He claimed he was the foster parent and that the kids were at daycare, but something felt off. We didn't have enough then." The judge ordered that body cam footage from that raid be retrieved and submitted into evidence. As the court waited, the atmosphere grew tense. The jury couldn't take their eyes off Lily or the dog. A few people whispered to each other, remarking how still Justice was, like he understood this was no ordinary day. Lily didn't speak again. She didn't need to. The pieces were aligning faster than anyone anticipated. Justice's prior involvement changed everything. The child's emotional bond with the dog wasn't coincidence. It was recognition. Later that day, the body cam footage was played. It was grainy but clear. Officers moved through the home. At the basement door, Justice pulled hard at the leash. Growling, his bark echoed loudly as he scratched the wood. The handler yanked him back. "What's the matter with you?" he asked the dog. They broke open the door. A small windowless basement. Empty. But there, barely visible in the footage, stuffed animals, a dirty mattress, and a discarded child's shoe. Lily's shoe. As the footage ended, a chill ran through the courtroom. The jurors looked stunned. Lily clung tighter to Justice, hiding her face in his thick fur. She hadn't spoken much, but her 2 words, "he knows," had unlocked something bigger than testimony. They had triggered truth. Justice had remembered. And now, so did everyone else. The courtroom remained still, even after the footage ended. The image of the discarded child's shoe haunted everyone, a silent testimony to what had happened in that basement. But something still felt incomplete. 1 shoe, 1 mattress. 2 girls once under that roof, according to old foster records. 1 missing. The prosecutor leaned toward her investigator. Find the second child, now. For months, Lily's story had been treated as isolated. But a background report, filed years ago, during an emergency child welfare check, listed 2 foster girls under the care of the defendant. One was Lily. The other was a 5-year-old named Mariah, and there was no formal record of her after that check. She had vanished. Now, with the pressure mounting, the search for Mariah became urgent. Investigators traced old addresses, social services contacts, even shelters. A lead finally came when an outreach worker recognized the name. "Mariah?" she said. "She came through once. Changed her name. She was terrified of cops and men. Ran away before we could place her." Another day passed in court. Lily didn't return, but justice was present during cross-examinations. The defense tried to shift focus, calling the dog a prop and claiming the girl had been coached. But the jury wasn't buying it. Their eyes stayed fixed on the evidence, the basement, the bark, the shoe. Then, on the third morning, something changed. The doors opened, and a thin girl entered the courtroom, flanked by officers and a counselor. She looked no older than 16, her eyes sunken from life on the run. But she walked straight, head high. She stopped when she saw Justice. The dog rose instantly. No command was given. No signal. Justice stepped forward and, in a rare moment of unbridled instinct, pressed his head gently into the teen's side. She froze. Her eyes welled up with tears. Her fingers shook as they touched his fur. "I remember him," she whispered. The courtroom fell into stunned silence again. The judge ordered a recess to prepare for her testimony. Outside, reporters scrambled to confirm her identity. Mariah, a second child. The missing piece. An emergency hearing was granted for her to testify. That afternoon, she took the stand. Nervous but determined, she began to speak. "I was there when he brought Lily in," she said, voice cracking. "She was just a baby. He locked us both in that basement sometimes. Said it was for punishment. He told me not to cry or I'd be next." She paused, swallowing hard. Justice came with the officers one day. "I remember that bark, loud and angry. I thought he was coming to get us. I thought maybe someone knew." The prosecutor stepped forward gently. "Mariah," did the defendant, "ever physically harm you?" Mariah nodded, a single tear sliding down her cheek. "He hit me. And worse. I still have scars." She slowly rolled up her sleeve, revealing faded bruises, faint but visible. Gasps came from the jury. The defense tried to object, but the judge waved it off. The connection was undeniable. 2 girls, 1 dog, 1 abuser. After her testimony, Mariah stepped down and walked past Justice again. He nudged her hand, and she smiled for the first time in years. In that moment, it became crystal clear to everyone in that courtroom. Lily hadn't imagined anything. Her 2 words, "he knows," weren't just innocent thoughts from a child. They were a key. A key that unlocked the past and brought long-buried truth to light. Justice hadn't forgotten that, and now, neither would the world. After Mariah's testimony, the courtroom didn't just change, it cracked open. The jury, once stoic and analytical, now leaned into every word with heavy eyes and solemn expressions. Some of them had children. All of them now saw Lily's silent gaze and Mariah's fractured voice, not just as witnesses, but as survivors of something far darker than anyone initially imagined. The prosecutor's team dug in deeper. With the help of Mariah, they requested access to sealed files, old foster records, caseworker logs, and police archives that had been boxed up for years and forgotten in the county's evidence storage. What they found made several people physically sick. Inside a poorly labeled box sat medical photos, scribbled therapy notes, and, at the bottom, a DVD. The label read, "Home surveillance footage, May 14th. It had never been viewed in court, never even cataloged into evidence. The officer responsible had retired 2 months later and forgotten about it. The prosecutor ordered a private review. When they played it, the room went silent. A grainy timestamp flickered in the corner as shaky footage filled the screen. The view came from a camera in the hallway outside the basement. At 2:17 a.m., muffled crying could be heard, Then came a child's voice, weak, barely audible. "Please let me out." Then barking, fierce, desperate barking. Justice. The video showed shadows moving. A door, a figure, presumably the defendant, opening it slightly, stepping inside and slamming it again moments later. It wasn't much, but it proved what the defense claimed didn't exist: a pattern of confinement and abuse. Later that day in court, the prosecutor requested to play the video before the jury. The defense argued it was prejudicial. The judge reviewed the timestamp, the storage record, and ruled admissible. The room went dark as the screen lit up. Everyone watched. When the barking erupted, it was like the courtroom relived the moment alongside the children. Several jurors looked down. Others looked away. But no one said a word. At the end of the footage, the prosecutor said quietly, "Let the jury note the timestamp." This was 3 weeks before Lily was removed from that house. She was still in that basement. The weight of that statement sat like iron in the room. Lily wasn't in the courtroom that day, but Justice was. As the lights turned back on, he sat calmly, alert, watching. It was like he recognized the sound of his own bark, a memory buried deep, now returned. The defense tried to recover, calling character witnesses and former neighbors who insisted they never saw anything wrong. But it was futile. The evidence was too powerful now, and the truth too loud to ignore. Mariah remained nearby, offering to testify again if needed. She was staying at a youth center under protective custody, but her eyes looked clearer now, her shoulders less tense. She had faced the monster and survived. Meanwhile, Lily's guardian informed the court she had started to speak more. Only a few sentences a day, mostly around justice. But she had repeated something over and over again after the video was shown. "That was his bark. That's when I cried." The little girl who had sat silently for months was starting to unravel her past, slowly, carefully, but clearly. And every word built the prosecution's case like a wall of truth. Justice had always known. His instincts had been warning them from the beginning. Now the court knew too. The defense was unraveling fast. After the video evidence surfaced, their strategy shifted from denying abuse to suggesting misunderstanding. "Children have vivid imaginations," the defense attorney argued to the jury, his tone softer, more desperate. "And dogs, while loyal, don't make legal judgments." But the jury wasn't buying it. Not anymore. The truth had seeped into every corner of the courtroom, in Lily's fragile voice, in Mariah's haunted eyes, in the bark that once echoed through a basement door. Each piece of evidence, old and new, painted a picture too vivid to be dismissed. Justice sat silently in his usual spot, calm and steady, like a quiet force holding the entire case together. Jurors watched him more than they did the defendant. Even the judge, once stoic, often glanced down at the canine with quiet respect. Mariah's second appearance on the stand was brief, but devastating. "Yes," she said clearly when asked if the man hurt Lily. "I used to hear her cry when he'd take her upstairs. And when I asked him to stop, he locked me in the basement for 3 days. No food, just water from a bucket." The room went cold. Even the court reporter hesitated with the keys. The prosecutor didn't need to dramatize anything. The testimony spoke for itself. But just to ensure clarity, she asked one final question. "Mariah, when you saw the dog, Justice, what did you feel?" Mariah's voice trembled, but she smiled slightly. Safe, the first time in years. The defense cross-examined gently, clearly aware that one wrong tone could sink the case further. "Mariah, you've been through a lot. Is it possible some memories are mixed up?" Mariah stared at him, unimpressed. "I may forget names or dates, but I don't forget screams. Or his smell. Or that dog saving my life." When she stepped down, The prosecutor knew the jury didn't just hear her. They believed her. Next came the final expert witness. Child psychologist specializing in nonverbal trauma response. She explained how deeply traumatized children often bond with therapy animals in ways they can't with people. Sometimes, she explained, a dog becomes their translator, their safety net, their mirror. She paused and looked toward Lily, who was watching quietly from the observation room with her new foster mom. And sometimes all it takes is 2 words to open the floodgates. The jury nodded. The judge did too. Then came closing arguments. The prosecutor stood in front of the jury, calm but resolute. You've seen the evidence, heard the testimony, and you've witnessed what love and loyalty look like in the form of a child and her protector. She gestured toward Justice, who sat quietly as if he knew. You don't need a child to deliver a speech to understand her pain. And you don't need a talking dog to recognize that something evil happened behind those doors. She paused. You just need to believe what's already in front of you. The defense offered a closing statement filled with legal jargon and uncertainty, begging for doubt. But the room had made up its mind. As the court adjourned for deliberation, Lily gently stroked Justice's fur. Her new foster mom crouched beside her and whispered, You did good, sweetheart. Lily looked up and nodded. He remembers. Outside the courtroom, cameras waited. Reporters already had headlines forming in their minds. But none of them truly understood what happened inside. How a dog's instinct, a child's whisper, and a teenager's courage came together to expose a predator. The jury filed out. The courtroom emptied. And Justice, once again, sat guard, not just as a dog, but as the story's silent hero. The jury was gone for just under 4 hours. Inside the courthouse, people waited in tense silence. Lily was in a side room with her guardian and Justice, who lay at her feet like a living shield. Mariah sat in the hallway with her counselor, nervously tapping her foot, watching every person who walked by like a threat. The courtroom had grown still, solemn, even reverent. Everyone could feel that something historic was about to happen, not because of high-profile lawyers or dramatic twists, but because a child had spoken when no one thought she could, because a dog had remembered when no one else did. Then, the bailiff stepped out and announced, The jury has reached a verdict. People rose to their feet. Lily was escorted in, this time seated on her foster mother's lap. Justice settled beside her like he had all along, not as a performer, not even as a therapy animal now, but as family. The defendant stood with his attorney, jaw tight, face unreadable. The judge entered. The room held its collective breath. The lead juror handed the folded verdict to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. He opened it slowly, read in silence, then looked to the jury foreperson. In the case of the state versus Ronald D. Marsh, he said, On the count of felony child abuse, how do you find the defendant? The foreperson stood. Guilty. Gasps filled the room. The judge continued. On the count of unlawful confinement? Guilty. A sound escaped Mariah's lips, not a cry, not a word, just breath. Release. On the count of aggravated assault against a minor? Guilty. 3 words, 3 counts. 3 lives forever changed. The judge set down the paper. The court thanks the jury for its service. Sentencing will be scheduled next week. The defendant is remanded into custody. The courtroom erupted into a quiet chaos. Reporters stormed from the room. People stood, hugged, wiped tears. The defense attorney said nothing. He simply touched his client's shoulder before sitting back down. But the focus wasn't on them anymore. All eyes turned toward Lily. She didn't understand everything, but she knew enough. She looked up at Justice and smiled. Not wide, but real. It was the kind of smile that only comes after holding your breath for too long. Can we go now? She whispered to her guardian. Her guardian nodded. Yes, sweetheart, it's over. Justice stood as she did, following her like a shadow. A few jurors clapped quietly as she passed. Araya met her at the door, holding back tears. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Their eyes met, and in that moment, they knew they had survived something awful together. And they weren't alone. Outside, cameras flashed. The prosecutor gave a brief statement, her voice proud but heavy. This verdict isn't just about a man being convicted, she said. It's about believing the quiet ones, listening to the ones who don't scream, and recognizing that sometimes justice barks before it speaks. Justice sat beside her, tongue out, panting in the summer heat. The story traveled fast. National news picked it up. People wrote letters, donated to child advocacy programs, even petitioned to recognize Justice as a legal advocate in child abuse cases. Inside the courthouse, long after the crowds had gone, the judge sat at his bench. Looking at the empty chair where Lily once sat, he shook his head and whispered to no one. All it took were 2 words, and a dog that never forgot. Weeks passed. The courtroom was silent now. Its echoes faded. But outside those walls, the story of Lily and Justice still reverberated, not just as a trial, but as a symbol. A reminder of the power of listening, even when the words are small. Especially when they're whispered. Ronald Marsh was sentenced to 38 years in prison. The judge called his crimes a betrayal of human decency and a direct assault on the most vulnerable members of our society. There was no apology from Marsh, just a blank stare as he was led away in chains. But for Lily, justice wasn't a number of years. It was safety. She didn't return to her old home. Her new foster mother, Angela, filed to adopt her. It wasn't immediate. These things never were, but the process had started. And so had healing. Every morning, Lily woke to the soft sound of paws padding toward her bed. Justice, now retired from active service, had been granted special permission to live with her permanently. He wasn't a police dog anymore. He was hers. She called him my brave dog. Sometimes when she spoke to him, she still whispered. It was a habit from fear, but also from trust. She knew he heard her. He always had. Mariah was placed with a different foster family nearby. She started attending therapy and GED classes, hoping one day to become a counselor for girls like herself. On her first day of therapy, she brought a drawing Lily had given her. Picture of a big brown dog with a girl on either side and a speech bubble that simply said, "He remembers." Across the country, the case became a reference point in legal circles. Child psychologists cited it in lectures. Prosecutors asked, could we use therapy dogs more often? One courtroom in Oregon even installed a plaque in their juvenile division in honor of Justice, who never forgot. But for Lily, the spotlight faded, and she was glad. She didn't want headlines. She wanted playtime, cartoons, blankets that smelled like laundry detergent, and not fear. One chilly autumn afternoon, she sat with Angela and Justice in the backyard. The wind rustled the golden leaves. Angela poured warm apple cider into 2 small mugs. Lily looked up and asked, "Am I safe now?" Angela didn't flinch. She didn't speak around it. "Yes," she said. "You are." Lily nodded, hugging Justice's neck. He leaned into her, eyes closed, tail wagging softly. A few weeks later, the adoption was finalized. The judge who presided wasn't the same from the trial, but he'd read the file. As he signed the papers, he smiled down at Lily. "Do you want to say anything?" Lily looked around the room. It wasn't scary like before. It was warm, safe, full of people who cared. She stood up on her chair, placed one hand on Justice's back, and simply said, "He helped me speak." The room fell quiet, Then applause broke gently like a tide. Not loud. Just real. Justice wagged his tail. And for the first time in years, Lily laughed. Not the shy giggle of a frightened child, but the clear, ringing laugh of someone who knew. They were finally home. Final. Note? In the end, it wasn't just a trial that changed lives. It was a moment. A whisper. A little girl pointing to a dog and saying 2 words. He remembers. Those words broke through silence. Those words built a bridge between fear and freedom. And sometimes, in a world too loud to hear the hurting, it takes a dog to listen. Justice didn't just serve the courtroom. He saved a life, and that made all the difference.